We actually got started right on time today, anyways. And funny enough, all of the other classes that we've gone over, that's become really what I'm known for. So I'm just going to keep you forever and ever. Today is really we're a wrap up of what we've been discussing in the philosophical realm. We're really going to go over two last philosophical arguments for the existence of God. And I want to be upfront with you this morning that these are not my go-tos. These are not the ones I would suggest you use right off the bat. However, the two main reasons I'm going over them today is that one, I think that they are useful. I think in certain situations when you get into conversations with folks, they can serve a real purpose and that can be really effective. However, there's got to be some groundwork laid first. And we've done that. We have laid the groundwork for the past couple of weeks for the month. And I know some of you are like thinking, I thought this was going to be a class on evolution. That's going to be next week. We're going to get into that study. And like I said, I'll kind of give an overview of what we'll be doing at the end of class today. But I've only got 5 slides today. So, I surely can't go over it with 5 slides, right? Maybe I've already just jinxed all of us. I'm sorry about that. But it's good to be back with you. I missed you guys last week. I had service by myself in a hotel room, and it is not near as good as being here with you guys. So I'm grateful to be back. So again, for those of you that may be new here or first time attending in this class, we've been going over arguments for the existence of God. I keep saying this, and I want to continue to reiterate that this is not meaning we get into an argument with folks. It's more so a way to defend what it is that we believe. And we have ways to logically, scientifically defend our belief system. And so we have gone over, and again, I told you I would briefly touch over the ones we've already covered. We're not going to spend a ton of time on them. But again, I want to keep these fresh in your mind so that if you do need to use them, you've heard it enough. You're ad nauseum almost that, oh yeah, I actually remember what he was talking about. So we had started with the cosmological argument. That one was the cause and effect. That's really probably a better usable name for the argument. But basically, it's a questioning of what caused this. You can get to a line of questioning, hey, what caused that? What caused this? Every effect has a cause, and every cause must be greater than the effect. That is widely accepted through all scientists. We established in the first class that there is scientific evidence that the universe began. So again, one of these astronomers, one that actually teaches at Tufts University, said that the problem of a beginning in the universe, well, what's the problem? Well, all of a sudden now you've got to come up with a cause for a universe, because if something began, it's an effect, right? So what caused the universe? Well, I would submit that God caused the universe. That's kind of the logical line there. That you would take. Then we went on to the teleological argument, really the fine-tuning argument, another better name for it, really defines how little of a chance we really had of having everything perfect for life if this was an unguided and unminded chaotic process. Again, we've already established none or very little order comes from an explosion. And maybe you could conceive statistically one of these things happening, but all hundreds of these things that have to line up the way that they are for life, it's beyond the realm of possibility statistically, right? That when you really get into looking at just how finely tuned our Earth is positioned within its solar system, on its axis, having a moon that's the right distance weight from it, keeping it on its axial tilt. You get into all these different types of things, and you start realizing this is a design. This is not something that happened from accident. So again, that's the fine-tuning argument, or the teleological. Then we got into the moral argument, which that kind of got fun. At least maybe for me. I don't know so much for you guys. But we talked about morality. And are there actions that themselves are right or wrong? Objectively, this action is right or is wrong. Doesn't matter what us, the subjects, say about the action. It's not subjective, because God has set moral precedents and moral law for us, right? And we believe this. And I think that I think it's easier to establish an objective evil, something that, regardless of who you are, this is always wrong. Now, it leads to the problem with evil, that if God is all powerful, all good, and he created everything, then he created evil. Well, we've already worked through that. You guys know, you guys said it last time we were here. He created us with free will, right? That he gave us the option to choose his will or choose ours. And sin, by definition, is missing the mark, introducing evil into the world. Therefore, by free will, he can create a system where evil can exist, but he himself did not create it. Okay? Then we got into free will. And that was another argument that we talked about. And as it was stated last time, it really is a simple answer. We do have free will. And most of the time when you look at what leading atheists say about free will, while it's a delusion, even Richard Dawkins came out and said, every time I think I believe I have free will, I'm just deluding myself. They have to convince themselves they don't have free will. They're the ones having to convince what naturally they already believe they don't have. So again, we have the free will, and that's an important thing. Free will is a very important thing, because if we didn't have it, what naturally follows? If we didn't have free will, if everything was determined, everything that we did was determined, what goes away? I'm hearing some light answers. I'm sure they're right. You just got to say them loud enough where I can hear them. I shoot guns for a living, so I can't hear. Okay, and why is that important? If you didn't have the ability to choose, what goes out the window? Right? Okay, accountability. What else? Who said it? There's no options. If you didn't have any options and you take an action and accountability, well, you can't be responsible for your action morally. You cannot be judged on a moral level for any action you take. Therefore, when you do something bad to someone else, it's not really bad. You didn't decide to do it. It was what with the chemicals and all the nature and nurture that you've experienced over all this time. It's pure physics that has determined what you were going to do in this exact moment in time. Chaos would ensue if you really believe that. Even Richard Dawkins say it's dangerous to get rid of religious belief, and he sees the value of believing in something above us giving moral law, because it's going to help us follow, basic rules that allow us to be kind to one another, actually have a working system. If we were all out for ourselves, we wouldn't do very well. I think that's pretty easy to see. So this morning, as I've said, what leads to what we're going to talk about next is that it's actually the original philosophical argument that was discovered, I guess, or created, if you want to say, by Anselm of Canterbury in the 11th century. It's around 1011 when he had first come up with this. So it's a long time ago. But basically, it's talking about the possibility of God existence. And when you look at the word ontological, it is the study of being, or the state of being. Okay? And I want to go over this fairly thoroughly just so that you understand. And again, The reasons I'm giving this to you is that, one, I don't want to leave off anything that you can use, and two, I think you can handle it. I really wouldn't have brought up something I thought was too out there, but I didn't start with this for a reason. Okay, so hang in there with me. But this is the study of being, and really it's talking about the possibility of God's existence. And that's an important thing to remember, because really what Anselm, or Saint Anselm as he was called, really got into was that God is the greatest being that can be conceived. And when we look at this, and I've got it actually laid out here. Can you see this? Man, I've got to do better. I have actually put this at 32 font. If I put it at any bigger, it's like 2 words per page. But one of these days I'll find the balance. I will. It'll happen. But basically the argument that he was making is that the greatest being that we can conceive, that we can think of, is God. If it weren't, then it wouldn't be God. Whatever was greater than that would be God. And that if we can conceive of him, and his existence is possible in a possible world, and I'm going to get into that in a second, he's got to be possible in every possible world. And so what I mean by that, and I want to go over that right now, because that's a really important thing to know when we're going through this argument. When philosophers use the phrase possible world, this is what they mean. It is a description of a world that's not in existence right now. It's a way that it could have been. The actual world is the description of what we see today. All the rules in it, natural laws, everything that we know. Okay, that's the actual world. But possible worlds in the philosophical realm means that it's a description of how it could have been but wasn't. An example, it's logically conceivable that unicorns could have existed. Could have. It's a horse with a horn. That could have happened. But we know, at least I think we know, unicorns don't exist. The actual world, they don't exist. Now, here's something interesting. Okay? There are some things that exist necessarily in all possible worlds, which would include the actual world, like numbers. Some mathematicians say that numbers necessarily exist because even if we don't call it one, because that's our language, the value of whatever number of things are in that possible world still exist. Therefore, numbers are going to be in any possible world we think of. What we're saying is that the maximally great being we're talking about would have to be possible in all worlds. That would include the actual world. So let's go through this. The first principle here, or the first premise, it is possible that a maximally great being exists. Okay, and we're gonna come back to that. If it is possible that a maximally great being exists, then a maximally great being exists in some possible world. So we've already talked about a version of what our world could have been, but isn't. 3, if a maximally great being exists in some possible world, then it exists in every possible world. It couldn't be maximally great. It could not be all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good if it didn't exist in every possible world. Does that make sense so far? Or I'm just like, man, you're just throwing out nonsense right now. Hang in there with me. Okay. If it's maximally great, it would exist in every possible world. 4, if a maximally great being exists in every possible world, then it exists in the actual world. 5, if a maximally great being exists in the actual world, then a maximally great being exists. Therefore, a maximally great being exists. God exists. Now, what I want to share with you is that you might be surprised. It's actually not very confrontational, steps 2 through 6 with most philosophers. It logically follows. All of these premises logically follow. Really where the problem is, you're still on the first page anyways. These are out of sync, and I've not synced them up, so that's on me. But number 1, that's where the premise really gets called into question. Is it possible for a maximally great being to exist? So I ask you, yes. Have we not talked for the past month about a couple of other arguments why it's logically coherent that a being like God would exist? He answers a lot of questions that we have about the cosmos, about our world, how it works today, about the moral laws that we have and the moral predispositions we have, that, hey, that's wrong, or this sense of justice that we have. He answers a lot of those questions for us, does he not? So in order for this argument to be null, you would have to say that it isn't possible for a maximally great being to exist. You would actually have to say it's logically incoherent. And what I mean by that is, for example, a married bachelor. Can't happen. Right? You check me on that. Right. That's, I mean, those things are paradoxical in nature. You can't have one and the other. They can't coexist. That's logically incoherent. And that's really where this gets a little dicey, is that these are logical possible worlds. Not talking about something, there's a question that always gets asked, well, if God's all powerful, can he create something he can't hold up, so heavy that he actually can't hold up? Have you ever been asked that question? Or ever thought about that question? I've thought about that question. Here's really where it comes down to. God can't do everything. Some of you are kind of like, what? Yeah, okay, so some people are actually giving examples, but I can't hear you. So what'd you say? He can't lie. He has told us himself that he cannot lie through his word. He can't sin. He can't be in the presence of sin. There are I say a lot of things. There are more things that you might not have initially realized that he can't do, because it would go against his nature. It wouldn't be logically coherent. So as we're coming back around to this argument, again, really what it's stating is that if he's even possible, if his existence is even possible, then he necessarily exists, because that's what it means to be maximally great. That's what it means to be all encompassing. I mean, the greatest thing that you can think of, because if it's the greatest thing you can think of, it would exist in all realities, would it not? Yeah, it would. Because if it didn't, then there's something greater than that. That would be God. Now you can understand why I didn't start with this argument, right? However, this is a really good argument when you've got somebody that maybe when you've talked to them enough, you started really getting them to entertain the idea that God does exist, the possibility does actually exist. Or maybe they're agnostic already, and that they already entertain the idea that it is possible. With this argument, you can really help somebody make the next step, to do the next amount of study that would get them to believing in the God of the Bible. Okay? Again, I want to make this clear. All of these arguments that we've been going over for these past couple of weeks, it's not an argument specifically for the God of the Bible. However, there are other things that we can show, like messianic prophecies, scientific foreknowledge within the Bible. There are other steps we can get, or the historicity of Jesus. All of those things we can actually show to somebody why God of the Bible is that maximally great being. But look, if we can't get somebody to believe in God in the first place, we can't go to the Bible regardless. So again, I like this one, and the more that I've pondered it, the more that I've studied it, it's become one of my favorites. But it's not one you start with, right? Obviously. It's definitely not as straightforward as the others. Do you have any comments or questions on this? Okay, I've got a hand.
Maybe my brain is just not geared toward philosophy that well, but I don't know. Maybe this one just doesn't do much.
Doesn't do much for you?
I mean, you could use the same discipline to say the Easter Bunny. Well, the Easter Bunny could exist in some worlds, and you have to believe it exists. Or Santa Claus, or anything.
But that wouldn't be the maximally great being. You see what I'm saying? Sure. And look, and that's fair. Well, I don't think you would dump every single one of these philosophical arguments on everybody anyways. Again, I introduced these to you so that if it's usable in a scenario, that you can. But the Easter Bunny, yeah, it could exist in a possible world, but it doesn't exist necessarily. Not like numbers do.
How that logical progression used for this would not apply to these.
Because it's not maximally great. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, you could say that it's the Easter Bunny, but I think that if you end up going down that line, if you go further with your study, again, like I'd already mentioned, you start to redefine what that maximally great being is, and you find out that it's God. Again, this is not an argument for the God of the Bible, that a maximally great being exists. You call it whatever you like. You call it the Easter Bunny if you like, but I think with more study, you end up finding it's God of the Bible, not the Easter Bunny. Not to mention, I think we have the history of the Easter Bunny anyways, right? That we know where it had really started. God made known his existence to us, and we have written form of it. But what I'm trying to say is that, yes, the Easter Bunny could exist for real in a possible world, but it's not necessary. It doesn't exist necessarily like the maximally great being does, that is greater than everything else. I don't know if that helps you at all. Probably doesn't. But again, that's why I didn't start with this argument, because again, it's not going to be usable in every situation. But have I... Well, look, and it's not everybody's either. That's the truth. And at the end of the day, like I said, I thought long and hard about even bringing this one up, just because, again, it might seem like a trick, or it might seem, I don't know, a little abstract. But I think if you gave it some time, it strengthens for you. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
There are probably people out there that think there's different universe, different things out there, but the way we study and everything, it's just God made all these like planets and stuff, but there is heaven. That's the only one side to ours, I would think.
Sure. And again, and maybe I didn't define this.
You're watching Dr. Strange or something like that. Y'all know what that is.
Yeah.
All these parallel universes and stuff.
Well, and again, that is definitely a new hypothesis that has been extended as an answer for where our universe has come from. And let me rephrase this again. When I'm talking about possible worlds, I'm not talking about a physical place. I'm not talking about an alternate universe that may actually exist. I'm talking about a version of reality that could have happened but didn't.
Talking about reality in bizarre world.
Yeah, I guess,
When I was a kid, Superman, Justice League, you had Superman and everybody here, and then you had Superman and everybody in Bizarro World, which was a completely different, everything was completely backwards.
yes, yeah. Well,
Superman, Batman, all the Justice League were completely evil in Bizarro World, and so what you're saying is, and what this hypothesis is saying is that God is here, God is all across the universe, across Bizarro
he would
World.
he would exist in Bizarro World. He would exist in the actual world. He would exist necessarily in every possible version of reality. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly. Any possible version of reality you could think of, there would be a supreme being or a maximally great being.
He couldn't be maximally great if he couldn't exist in every version of every world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's
Clear as mud.
clear as mud. Yeah, I'm sure.
I got it.
No, but I appreciate it. I mean, that's a good example. And I just lost my train of thought. But maybe it isn't the argument that you use, especially if you feel the way about it that you do right now. I would suggest that you spend some time, if you're interested in it, to look at it. But it's not, again, with your example of the Easter Bunny, again, you would have to make the Easter Bunny what God actually is for him to fit in this argument the way that it is. You would have to call that maximally great being the Easter Bunny, basically. Because the Easter Bunny, again, it's not necessary to exist in all versions of every world. It doesn't exist necessarily. Does it make sense that numbers exist necessarily? Yes or no? Yeah, it's they have to, because it represents, the values here. We've got, I don't know how many people in this room, and no matter what language you use, it's still numbers. It's what we would call it, but that value still exists, and it would exist in every world, every version of the world that has some being in it. If it had one, there'd be one person in it. That's a number. If you had 0 things in it, that's still technically a number, right? So again, there are things that exist necessarily, and what I'm saying is, what this argument's saying is that the greatest conceivable person or being would have to exist necessarily across all possible worlds. This argument went great. I'm so glad that I decided to do this. Well, no, and again, that's what I'm saying. By possible, it was something that could have happened. In another world, I could have been a lady. And I guess some would say that I could still be a lady if I want to. But just as an example, I could have been a lady, but I'm not. I'm a guy. That was a possible version of what I could have been, but I'm not. My name could have been something else, but it's not. My parents could have been someone else, but they're not. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to get to you. And I think that's probably maybe the hardest part about this is defining what possible worlds, what I mean by that. It's not that this actually exists out there, that, there's a clown juggling 9 things in this, where we're all clowns juggling something. That's not what I'm talking about. That would be a weird place. But what I'm trying to say is that these are versions of reality that could have happened but didn't. And God would have had to exist in all of them. Because if he's to be maximally great, he would be necessarily existent in all of them. So again, you're starting to realize now why it takes some time maybe with this argument, that I think if you do ponder it and you start really grasping some of those things, I think it could be effective. Again, it's more of a niche usage. It's not as straightforward, I think, as the moral argument. I think that might be even maybe one of the best ones to go to. So, yep, I don't know if it did any good with that. But
sounds like a room full of college kids kind of argument.
Oh yeah, no, this is definitely what would happen in a college setting for sure. I have seen many of professors discuss this exact argument, and I got foolishly brave enough to give it to all of you guys.
I guess to me, the other ones seem like cause and effect and things like that don't convince you. Again, I guess it's just because I'm not here to philosophy. I don't understand how this.
Well, like I said, this is not one you start with. I think that if you got somebody on the track of a God possibly exists, this is one that you could go to and it could help. You see what I'm saying? That really what it's getting at is that if it's possible that a maximally great being exists, then he really actually does. You would have to say that it isn't possible for him to exist, for this argument not to actually be logically true.
Something, like I said, it has to be a supreme God, but something doesn't come to nothing.
Right, and we're getting back to the cause and effect, the cosmological argument. And again, that's why I like using this at the end when I've talked with somebody for a while, and we've kind of gone over some other things. This is, again, not one I start with. You got some? No. Yeah.
I would throw that out because yourself, several times standing there, you said, if it is possible for the maximum.
Sure.
But the statement number one says it is possible. So it sets in stone that, everything else, all those ifs later are feasible.
Yes.
But really, I don't like as you said, I don't like the point number one because it sets in stone. It sets the tone that there is. It should be if there is. And then, of course, everything else is insignificant then after. I don't like it.
That's fair.
But you see what I'm saying? Point number one said it is possible that you could say it is possible that the Easter Bunny, and then therefore. So.
But see, again, you're making a false equivalency with the Easter Bunny and a maximally great being.
Well, forget that. I'm talking about it is versus if.
It versus is. It's a definitive statement. Is what you're saying.
It versus if.
That's what I'm saying. It is a definitive statement. That's what you're saying, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So what you would have to say, it's not possible. It's not possible for a maximally. Because all this is still saying that it is possible. It's just possible. We're not saying that he does exist necessarily in the first premise. We're just saying that it is possible that he does exist.
Well, that's what the argument says.
Correct.
But I don't think that's a proper argument. I know he does. And I know that, I know what you're saying. But in like so many just philosophical arguments, they state that it begins with it is, and then therefore it's possible. But I just don't like the first point in an argument.
That's fair. And again, that's why I don't start with it. I think that if you've already established it's possible with your other arguments, it can really be a big hammer stroke at the end. Because look, you talk about all those other four arguments, and you've got someone to say, yeah, I think it is possible that God exists. Well, if it is, by this line of logic, he necessarily exists. So again, it does feel like a trick. And again, I think you got to spend some time with it. And maybe it's not that useful in the people you'll talk to. I wanted to introduce it to you guys. Obviously, you have the ability to use it if you like or if you don't.
That's the whole thing when you're dealing with abstract. It's all subjective. John can argue one word, and he can argue if, and you can argue it, and it just seems like I said, a group of college students going in circles all night long.
Sure. And again,
it's all.
Again, what I would say is that if you have somebody, okay, we're not over yet. We're not over time yet. If you have somebody that's already made the statement, yeah, it is possible that God exists. I think this is one you can go to. Obviously, there's mixed feelings on it. So again, discretion. If you don't like it, don't use it. That's totally up to you. Do what?
It's just all hypothetical. I mean,
Hypotheticals.
I think it's a great argument. I mean, if you get somebody to say, yeah, it's possible if God exists, well, possibly exists here, or possibly exists somewhere else.
He would have to exist everywhere, is basically. That's what we're saying.
I mean,
Yes.
Hey, man, I'm curious if you took God out and put Satan in, do you figure out the thing are?
Well, again, that would make Satan the maximally great. And look, I'm not saying God here. That the argument would change, that Satan would exist everywhere and all possible.
what about changing out for good or evil? Does good exist? Does evil exist? I mean, can it not exist over, if there's a supreme good?
Well, here's the interesting point about that. Evil can exist without good. Good can exist without evil. I'm going to go ahead and make that statement.
It can or can't.
Evil cannot exist without good. Good can exist without evil. I know that's a bold statement to say, but what is evil? Let's define what it is.
I do understand that point too, because if you don't have something to measure it against,
It's a deviation from what's good. It's a deviation from the standard. Right? Shadow can't exist without light, but the light can exist without shadow. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm rethinking introducing this one to you guys. Because I may have done more damage than good here today. But we can move on. Okay. Yes.
Have you defined ontological?
Defined ontological? Yes. So ontological, what that word breaks down to mean is the study of the state of being. So again, when we're talking about the possibility of God's being, if he's possible, then he have to exist in every version of the world that could be conceived, because he's the greatest conceivable being.
Because this is an area of metaphysics.
Yes, it is.
So if you don't like that area, don't get in it.
That's fair.
But,
I think we've established that today. Absolutely. But way to wrap that up. I appreciate that. Yes.
Yeah, I think the problem is, and I've heard this before, this argument and stuff, but I've always heard it with God, not with a maximal great being. And I think our definition of God fits. When we think about makes a great being, then that has to be God. It has
Yes.
to be his qualities, his abilities, his all powerful, all being, all knowing, everything. And then that's where the Easter bunny there, everything else breaks down when you get down to number 3, because they're not that. So they can't be that. So the argument breaks down with all other things other than God, or if you want to call
Exactly.
it great being. But still, you got to define that maximally great being as not just being better than everybody else, but being
The best. It is the highest conceivable being.
it's God.
And if you want to call that Easter bunny, I don't know if God will appreciate it.
It's got to have those qualities, though. It can't be the Easter bunny we know. It's got to be have
Exactly.
the qualities of being all powerful, all knowing, and all being in order for that not to break down.
Exactly. Thank you. That actually cleared up back there a little bit, maybe? No? Again, it's America. You use it if you like and if you don't. So, all right. So we're going to move on to the next thing. And again, this was one I wanted to mention in passing, because this is one that, again, from a logical standpoint, may not have a lot of weight with most folks if you're in a logical philosophical discussion. Okay. But this one actually is mentioned. If you looked up lists of philosophical arguments, this is one that comes up. And so that's why I wanted to cover it just a little bit today. And that one's called religious experience. So what I mean by religious experience, and I want to kind of define what that means, because that can be even subjective among different folks. But what I mean by that is, it's not that God came down and changed my life physically in my presence. I saw him. I had some miracle happen. That's not what I'm talking about. But when you have that experience where you're just awe-inspired, when maybe you're outdoors, maybe it's the birth of a child, maybe fill in the blank, you had this experience you weren't trying to have necessarily, and it just makes you think about God instantly, and you have a spiritual connection. It was on a spiritual level. And I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands. I have been that way in my life. I've been in certain instances where I thought, wow, I mean, this is something only God could do. And I felt the presence of God. It's a feeling type of thing. This is on a spiritual level, maybe even emotional level. I only mention this one so that when you have a discussion with someone that may have experienced something like this and can't readily define it, you have an opportunity to say, I can help you define what that is. I forget who it was that actually kind of gave a testimonial a couple of weeks ago. Yes, it was Becky. she had even said, look, I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't grow up necessarily believing in God, but I was looking up at the stars and thought, this world has to be bigger than me, has to be bigger than us. And she kind of had what I would call a religious experience, something that, again, kind of connects the spiritual with the mind. Again, this is not one I come out and say, hey, religious experience exists, so God exists. Boom, done. That's not what this is. And again, that's why I saved these for last. I wanted to cover them broadly so that you were aware of them. And if you want to use them, you're more than welcome to. But again, I wouldn't use this unless someone is trying to describe something that would fall in the category of a religious experience. It gives you an opportunity to maybe bring them in to the worldview that we know. Does that make sense? And again, I only bring it up because it's actually one that's considered a philosophical argument. So that one may not elicit a lot of questions. Oh, okay, I'm back. All right. Yes.
I went to a seminar at NTSU with Kyle Bay,
Oh, yeah.
and he was with an actual rocket scientist. And the two of them were talking about the proving God exists based on the size alone of the universe, because it's just in our galaxy, the amount of distance between the sun and the last star out there, or even the first star out there, is 93 million light years. Now, if you think that someone on this world or this earth did that, that's a religious experience you're missing. You know, the just knowing that a human cannot produce something that expansive.
Well, and that something the size of a period of a dot exploded into this expansive universe that has tens of millions of galaxies that have millions upon millions, even billions of stars.
It's not even possible. It's not even possible for someone on the earth to do that.
Well, sure. And no, I don't think anybody would necessarily say that a person would do that, but that the universe itself came from nothing is really, again, what you would have to say. And when you start pondering these things, it would potentially elicit this spiritual recognition that I've got something within me that isn't just natural, right? Well, and that maybe could get turned on me a little bit. Yeah, you're not natural at all.
The same thing with something so small we can't see.
Sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, it goes to from macroscopic to microscopic, you know, on a major scale. And again, this could be many different things. And again, I bring it up only because it is listed within those philosophical arguments. I like, especially the first three. And I like getting into the free will one, just because I think you can really make someone have to admit that they go against their nature of knowing they have free will, but they really don't. So again, I think these last two, you may never ever use them, but I think there are certain situations that you can, and they can be useful. If they're not, then don't. I would submit that you probably don't use them if you're not comfortable, or if you yourself are not convinced necessarily.
They go along with a new point. Out with Doubt by Kyle Butt.
Yeah, that's actually one that the youth group in Rivergate used.
But it goes into explaining a lot of that too. I'm still reading. When I get time, I sit and read it. But, to go along with, and he actually brings up that point that the universe, everything's perfectly spaced. If we were 1 inch closer to the sun.
Yeah, you're getting into the fine tuning argument. Yeah.
And they also goes into the fact that you realize that the eye is made up of, I think it's 100 million megapixel or whatever. It's processing things much faster. I can't recall the exact numbers, but we're playing catch up as humans. I mean,
Oh, sure.
What's the?
Yeah.
You have a 30 megapixel camera now on your phone or whatever it is, I mean.
Yeah, it's still light years away from what the eye actually is. Sure. And again, that's why there's a draw to that argument, is I think there's more tangible ways that you can show it. And again, I wanted to bring up these other two just to let you know they exist. Again, please don't feel obligated to have to use them. Look, you might use the cause and effect one and you've got somebody hooked. You didn't even have to use the moral or teleological. Yeah, you might. But these are tools there for your using. And aren't you glad we're now out of the philosophical realm of what we're going to be studying? We're going to be going more into evolution, maybe science. That might be a little more tangible. I think there's going to be some things we address or that I address in this class that will be very useful for you. Specifically dating, specifically theistic evolution, the idea that we as Christians can believe in evolution as scientists say that it happened and believe in the Bible. There's some things that really are incompatible with those two worldviews, and I'm going to show you why they are. It's not abstract, so to speak. It's not this, okay? But we're going to get into it, and again, we've got a really cool visual aid. How many of you have seen Is Genesis History? Nobody? All right. Wait. You have? You've seen it? And you've seen it. Okay. We're going to use that film, just segments of that film, to show what we're talking about, like the Grand Canyon, talking about the flood, talking about genetic information and alleles and what they show phenotypically, meaning outward appearance, all those types of things. And they do probably the best job of giving visual aids, but we're going to really go in depth because you can't cover all of this stuff in 1 hour long video. So what we're going to do is we're going to show about 5 to 10 minutes of that video to let you see what we're talking about. I'll have a PowerPoint, bring it up, and we're going to talk in depth about some of these things so that you are exposed to, again, a Christian worldview of science. Science exists. And again, evolution. I believe in it. I believe in change over time because that's really what evolution means. But we need to define what it is that we're talking about. Do I believe that everything came from one single-celled organism? No, I don't. And I think there's good reason not to believe that, even scientifically. So again, that's really what we're going to get into from here on. Before we head out, and again, I have, yes. No, I just brought it up. I was going to mention it in passing, to be honest, just because it's one of those things that people will define it differently. And again, for those that may actually believe that miracles still exist, they would maybe throw that in the camp of religious experience. So, but a religious experience, I would think, would be getting in touch with the spiritual aspect of an experience in general. I'll go ahead and ask you, has anybody in here, and again, I'll raise my hand. I've been out in the woods by myself and have just felt all stricken, with God's, I think they're probably saying, hey, you're done here. But I've had a religious experience many times in the woods in God's creation. I would say, again, God didn't come and whisper something into my ear. That's not what I'm saying. But unprovoked, this feeling of, wow, this amount of complexity, this amount of beauty doesn't come from chaos. It just can't. I felt a spiritual connection to what God has created, and that's what I felt. And again, that's a hard thing to really start something with, but if somebody's in that situation, they've had that experience, that's where you can start, at least. I'm trying to give you multiple starting places so that you can meet somebody where they are. You got to find that common ground. So.
If they just say, for instance,
Well, and some may not. A lot of times people will write off a feeling that they have. And again, Richard Dawkins had said it, every time I think I have free will, I'm deluding myself. They're actually packing down something that they naturally want to feel and want to know is real, but their worldview is not going to let them do that. I think if you had somebody that's honest with how they felt about something, you can have that discussion. And again, I'll only say one more time, I guess, this is something that can be used in a niche situation. It may not be something that you use, but I wanted to, again, expose you to it at least so that you know it's out there, that it can be used. As I've actually had some good conversations with folks, actually just recently. They had their brother that was cancer ridden, and he said, look, I didn't believe in God, never prayed in my life or anything like that. And I had somebody pray for me, and somehow we got more time with my brother and that he's doing better. And for him, he said, I can't see that happening. For him, it was a religious experience. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say. And I think you have the opportunity to capitalize on that feeling. So, hey, I can kind of show you where that comes from. I can help you define what that feeling is. Because you do have a spirit within you. God's given us a spirit, a portion of it. We have a soul. It can be lost and it can be saved, right? That's really what I'm getting at. And again, it's more nuanced than stating cause and effect, fine-tuning, moral, right? So again, that's why I brought it up, because I've actually used it a few times, but it's been in very specific situations. Any other comments or questions? And I'm sure if you've got some, hey, please, come to me afterwards. We can talk about it, because obviously like I said, I have a superpower. I can talk into existence, the complete opposite of what I say initially. Only 5 slides. We were never getting out of here on time, were we? But I'm going to stop talking now. I hope you guys have a great day. Have a great week. We'll start next week with Genesis' history and talking about evolution and God and where does it all meet? Where does it all shake out? That kind of thing. Let's end in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for all the many blessings that you've bestowed upon us. We're so grateful for this opportunity to meet with brothers and sisters in Christ, to have a moment of praise, singing praises to you, praying to you, knowing that you hear us. What a blessing that is. Lord, I pray that we continue to better ourselves, better ready ourselves for conversations, for evangelism, to bring souls to Christ and to at times defend what it is that we believe. Lord, we're so thankful for all the guidance that you provide, and Lord, that all the blessings, physical, emotional, spiritual, that you bestow upon us. Lord, help us to go out in this week and be the Christian example that you would have us to be. Help us to always remember the life that Jesus led, that he led a selfless life. Help us to emulate that in everything that we do. And Lord, we thank you most of all for him, his life, and the sacrifice that he made for us. And without it, we would have no hope. We ask this all in Jesus' most high, most holy, and amazing name. Amen.